A global problem affecting every American who is shopping for a new car. It is a worldwide shortage of semiconductors that's hammering the auto industry and auto workers. 75% of semiconductors are made in Asia, and in cars, these microchips power things like brakes, airbags, windshield wipers. Cars are like rolling computers these days. General Motors and Ford are among the U.S. automakers that have faced big production cuts because of this key parts shortage. CBS Sunday Morning correspondent Lee Cowan recently went to Michigan to learn more about how this tiny little chip is upending lives.
There's not a window in the place. And yet, Miller's Bar in Dearborn, Michigan, has always had a pretty good view of history.
How long has this place been here?
It's been to be 81 years in November.
81 years.
Probably one of the longest running restaurants here in Dearborn.
It's kept grilling its signature burgers through wars, inflation, deflation, stock and housing market crashes, even COVID. But when the global shortage of semiconductors, a tiny piece of technology that Henry Ford could never have imagined, forced the nearby Ford plant to trim production of its F-150 trucks, Dennis Miller knew his business would have to tap the brakes too.
How much of your business is tied to the auto industry, you think?
Oh, I would guess probably 60%. You know, it's pretty big. I don't think anybody around here is running 3 shifts anymore.
Like clockwork, his bar stools would prop up the tired and the hungry, line workers just getting off their shift. Some of them still come, but most of his regulars are back home pinching pennies.
I don't know what's going to happen. You know, time will tell, and I don't think this is going to get over for a while.
You don't think?
I would think this chip thing is going to be another year before they get things straightened around and start getting cars out again.
Wow.
All around Detroit, brand new vehicles sit sequestered, waiting for some faraway chip to make them whole. Sitting there means they're not sitting here at car dealerships, which means
we used to have 25 salesmen. Now you're half of that.
Robert Giuliano is a salesman for Chrysler in nearby Southfield.
If you learn to adapt, and recognize the trends, you can survive still.
Time was, say, 25 years ago, when semiconductors were homegrown, made right here in the U.S. Now 75% of that manufacturing is done in Asia. As you might expect, that's been a pretty big topic of conversation at union halls, like this one, for years.
If we don't start paying attention to the supply chain, the global supply chain, and start bringing some of that work back to this country, we're all going to be in the same boat soon.
Mike Huerta is president of UAW Local 602 in Lansing, Michigan. Most of his members work up the road at this General Motors plant, which had been churning out Chevy Traverses and Buick Enclaves. But it's eerily quiet these days. The chip shortage has kept employees Brian Stead and Daniel Hinton out of work since the summer.
How much longer do you think you guys can hold on?
Honestly, I don't know. As long as I have to. It's definitely scary, but what can you really do, besides just wait?
It involves decisions that people are making on the other side of the globe that are going to affect whether or not, or if, when we go back to work, so.
That you have no input on?
Yeah, absolutely none.
GM says workers will be back the first week of October, but for how long? No one really knows.
We don't know what amount of parts are going to come to us. We don't know how long they're going to sustain being able to supply us.
So you could be right back here in 6 months again.
We could be right back here in 2 weeks.
Company towns like Lansing have always been linked to the economic tides. When one boat rocks, everyone else's does too. Stephen Farrell's restaurant, Tony M's,
All right, who had the baked spaghetti?
is doing its best to keep its moorings.
I used to have 39 employees. I'm down to 19.
And is that directly related to the chip shortage?
Absolutely.
He says the bar is almost always filled with someone who either works at the GM plant, supplies the GM plant, or supplies the suppliers. Workers like Vinny Polito know someone in every link of that chain.
I have no family to have concerns about, but a lot of my friends that I work with, they got family, kids, they got bills, they got doctor appointments, dentist appointment.
Bread and butter worries that have echoed through the bars of Michigan for generations.
With the medium well.
Back at Miller's Bar, the lunch rush is over. Things are winding down. Dennis Miller surveys the landscape, wondering just what dinner will bring.
It's like everything else, you'll get through it. It's just, you got to grin and bear it.
In the auto industry, if the optimism goes, so does everything behind it.
Take care now. Have a good day, guys.
Miller's is a survivor, not because it's been lucky, but like Detroit itself, it works at surviving every day. For CBS Mornings, I'm Lee Cowan in Detroit.
So this is a really big and painful deal for auto workers. It's also the reason why new cars are very expensive, used cars are very expensive, and the analysts are looking at this and saying it's probably going to last not just for a few months, but for a few years. It's not going to bounce back. Makes me very nostalgic for the days when putting down the window wasn't boop with a computer. It was you got to reach over and get the one over there.
I don't miss that. I don't miss those days. But I do worry about when you see stories like this. It's just another example of how COVID has affected all of us in ways that you don't even think about. So it starts there, and then it trickles to the restaurant. Then it trickles to everything that you do in your life.
Yeah.
I like what he said, you have to grin and bear it, but I think a lot of us are tired of grinning and bearing it.
Yeah, I spent 4 years in Michigan, and when I moved to Detroit, I quickly realized how the auto industry is the common thread that is literally woven into every part of the city. And when one thing goes down, it has an impact on everybody that lives in it. But it also speaks to what we need to do here in states and manufacture the things that we may need to keep our industries booming. Thoughts are with the people out in Detroit. I love Michigan, that's for sure.